Good afternoon, everybody. Today at CBS ArcSafe, we would like to welcome you to a refresher on what we can do for remote racking and remote switching for GE, AK, and AKR switchgear. We'd especially like to thank those who are out there working in the critical industries, whether it's the medical or data, power, or anybody else who's working to keep the lights on and help to keep people safe and help out in the medical fields. We would like you to know that we've got plenty of other companies in the group CBS that work to help make that happen also. We know that you may not use these tools every day, and that getting to just get a brief refresher on them is important, so that if you haven't used something in 6 months and you're coming up on like a spring outage, hey, it's time to break it out and practice and then put it to good use, okay? Our sales team isn't traveling right now because of what's going on. At the same time, we want to use this opportunity to reach out and touch you. And if you've got questions, we're going to work to answer those. Put your questions in the sidebar as we go through this, and Ben will let me know what that says, and we'll work to get those answers. If you've got other questions or specific requests, we've got info@cbsarcsafe.com. We've also got our 877-472-3389 phone number that you can call or forward questions through the website to us. So please, anything that you need to ask us about the equipment, we'll be more than happy to get that information to you. Next one. For myself, my name is Greg Davis. I've been with CBS ArcSafe for a little over 11 years. I started out domestically, traveling through the central United States and then working in the Texas, Louisiana Gulf Coast, and now doing a lot of international travel for us to visit customers around the world. So the first thing that I'll tell you, if we're going to look at GE AK switchgear, you know, General Electric made the AK1s from about 1951 up to 1977. In the early 1960s, they started out following that with the AKD5 switchgear. And then around 1977, they went to the AKD6. This is AKD6 switchgear right here. And then in the late 1970s, early 80s, they came up with the AKD8, and this was made up through about the 2000 timeframe, if what I've been able to research with GE is correct. We work with all of these, so if you don't know specifically what you have, don't be afraid to, if you're a new customer and looking at this stuff for the first time, send us pictures and we'll help you out with that. The first thing that I would like to also, let you know is we work to test every single piece of equipment here before we're going to send it out. And so if you've got questions about what you have, please send us the pictures and we can work to verify what you have and then make the proper equipment for you, okay? Anytime we're working with a breaker, we need to get our nomenclature correct. So we refer to task-specific items. Remote racking is getting a breaker on and off the bus. Remote switching involves remote switch actuators and remote switch operators. So this is a remote switch actuator. Here's a remote switch operator, okay? And so we have it in a task-specific form. And today, what we're going to work with first is dealing with switching first, because you're going to open the breaker first before you're going to bother to rack it. Now, we're not going to rack all of these today. We're going to rack just a couple to show you that we've got things to do that. And then we're going to work to switch a couple of these. So this is the AKD5 switchgear, which was made from like 1960 to 1977. With a GE breaker, there are actually 2 set screws inside this handle that you have to take off in order to get the handle off, okay? And once you back out both the set screws, then you can take the handle off, and we can work to fit our remote switch actuator over the charging handle right here, okay? This is an RSA 18. It's made for GE AK 50, 75, and 100s, okay? And this attaches with 2 high-strength rare earth magnets. This is what these are. And they do have a warning on the side saying don't get your fingers basically between it and what you want to put it on, because they can each generate about 150 kilos or about 350 pounds of force to hold it on, depending upon the thickness of the metal you put it on. So, and you'll see now that that is securely attached to the face of the circuit breaker and to the face of the cubicle. Now, on an RSO, depending upon the style we have, we'll have a tag on it, and it'll tell us how to set up our RSO here. You'll notice that we've got a 3-pin and a 4-pin connector on here. And what I would say is we affectionately say these are idiot resistant. You know, somebody may try to hook up a 4-pin connector to a 3-pin, but it's not going to work. The 4-pin always goes to the open and close or dual solenoids, and the 3-pin will always wind up going to the motor. Let me take a look here. Where is it? It's over here on this side. There we go. Now, this, while it's sitting right here, we can stretch this cord out to about 30 plus feet away. Okay, so you don't want to just hook this up and be sitting right here. This wireless remote would allow us to operate this from up to 100 meters away with a clean radio path. Okay, and the way that we turn this on here is if we're going to just look at it, I'm going to turn this on so you can see. We've got, first we're going to check to see that we've got battery power here with at least 24 volts. We're going to then check what we've got for cycle set. We need 4 cycles on this. Okay. We've got 3.5 for our first timer. Then we got 3.2 for the second. Now, to be able to operate this, if we want to go to the radio remote, we're going to go to remote on here, and I'm just going to turn the box over, and you can see that I've gone to remote, and then I hit the on button, and you'll see it comes back on. Now, this is where I can operate this from 100 meters away with wireless. Okay, and I could step back and I'm going to hit trip first because I want to make sure the breaker's open. And so if we were going to just trip the breaker, then we would take this off. We would go to the racking part of the operation. If we want to see ourselves do the charge close now, we can actually punch the charge close on here. And the system's going to start going through the process now of charging and closing this circuit breaker. And it's actually going to trip free just because of this breaker. So be ready for a loud boom when it does this. So that's basically how this system would operate to allow us to close or trip the breaker. Now, once we've opened the breaker, we would take the RSA off the face of it. I'm just going to set this here for right now. And then we would rack the breaker out. These are just like the RSAs. They're geometry specific for the particular type of breaker. For the GAKD family, we have a large and a small. The small go to the 25 frames, which the handle's actually located above instead of below in a different position. We use the handle to help resist torque with this. We would connect this now to our RSO4. We'll turn this on. And while these look the same, just to point out, This one is set up for racking. This one is set up for switching. I could have two people in the same substation doing different operations, and this radio remote is not going to talk to this box, and this radio remote won't talk to that box. So we'll just check our settings here of 6.6 and 3.8. And what we'll do is we'll look at install 6.6 and 3.8. And all I need to do now is I simply touch the remove button, and the breaker is going to rack out. And again, you want to be outside the arc flash hazard boundary when you do this. Standing right here doesn't get you any safety. And now the breaker's racked out. At this point, if you do your lockout tag out, you would then work to do whatever work you're needing to do downstream or remove the breaker from the cubicle. And then when you put your new breaker back in the cubicle, you'd make sure you've got all your lockout tag out stuff done. And then you'd hit your install button. And we're going to rack the breaker back in now. Now, just on the side, here's the remote racking system for the GE AKD8 for the standard face. And what we'd say is, this is our standard face. You have to, again, take the handle off so that you can gain access to the racking port. This one simply clips in to the trip button once you've got the racking screw exposed. And this fits nice inside the face of it. The next one that we're looking at here is for the GE AKD6. And this one goes to the face. I'll just take it off real quick and put it back on. There we go. And you can just see how that looks right there. Like the GAKD5, the GAKD6, the entire cubicle door is going to come out. Okay, so one of the things to note with GAKD6 switchgear, you would actually have an AKD5 as a main on it, if you've got a main time main setup, and then you have the smaller faces like this, and so you'd still need two RS3s to do that if you're using the RS3 type setups. With this one, we have 5.5 and 4.0, and we'll go right through how this sets up. So to do the install, since I'm going to change this, and I'm going to go to 5.5, I go down from 6 to that, and then for remove, I need 4.0, so I actually have to come up 0.2. Yeah, so install is now 5.5, and I'll just show how it moves up and down. So this is down, and that's up. Okay.
Can you bring it closer just so we can get a quick shot of the CCM?
Okay, I can do that. Okay. So we're good with voltage and everything on there. So now all we have to do is we step back again outside the arc flash hazard boundary. And we're going to touch our remove button. And here you see the whole cubicle with the door and everything move out. And now we're going to simply rack it back in.
Maybe get into the clutch and
Yep.
CC works.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to talk about this, okay, the GEAKD5, GEAKD6, GEAKD8 are rotary types of racking mechanisms. And with these, we look at these as mechanical systems. So the way the current control module works is we've worked to go through and find out how much force in terms of foot-pounds it takes to rack off and rack on breakers of various amp frame sizes. And then we convert that into amp settings for the current control module to run on so that we don't try and hurt any of the switchgear. We know the forces that should be required to rack these on and off the bus because of our extensive warehouse capability we've got from our sister company in Gainesville, Texas at Circuit Breaker Sales, and taking lots of measurements up there over the years for various types of circuit breakers. Some things to note: if you see a breaker not coming off or taking more force to take a breaker off the bus than to go on, you probably have something wrong in the switchgear. We've seen this where we've actually been given bad circuit breakers to do demonstrations on at various customer facilities and help them identify that they do have problems with their switchgear. So these are things that we know, and we can show you. The peak force should always be when the finger clusters spread. And if you're seeing something outside of that, other than when you get to the end of the screw going on and off the bus, okay, if you see something different than when you get to the end of the racking operation where it takes more to get a breaker off than go on the bus, you have a problem in that, and you need to be willing to address the maintenance issues you have. The other RSA we're going to play with right now, this is the RSA 45A for the GE AKD8 switchgear. And one thing I just want to point out real quick, on the top of this we've got an indexing mark, and that's so that you know you've got the collar straight up and down, because you'll see that this is like an oval shape inside of here. Can you see that good enough, Brian? Let me bring that in a little bit closer so you can see this. So you can see the shape of that handle. It's made to go right over it. The GAK series all have a similar handle shape. Okay. Okay, that goes right on the door. Again, we've got our 3-pin connector up here and our 4-pin connector down here. And this time, we're going to change the settings to 5.0, 5.0, and 1 cycle. So you'll see me do that here on the RSO1 before I hook it up. Okay. So we're going to go to local. We're going to go to cycles. And we've got to go to 1. So we're going to run this through. So we got 1 cycle set. Then we need to get to 5.0 and 5.0. Yep, 5.0. Got to cycle it past. Sorry about that. There we go. So that's set. I'll take this back out, switch it back to radio. Oh, that's on.
what breaker style is this 45 for?
This is for the GE AKD8, and it's for the manually operated. So it's for there's a series of these made. They can come in a blue face sometimes for the first generation, or a black face. But you're going to see you've got the manual handle on it, like this. That's going to tell you it's a manually operated breaker. You can have, if you were to look at the GE AKD8 families, we've got both manually and electrically operated breakers, and you've got small face, the standard face, which is what this one is, and then the other one, which is a main, which has a different depth on it. So it's one RSA for each type, just because of variations in geometry, forces, and the face of the face shapes that we have to deal with.
We'll be talking AKR 6 through 10.
AKR 6 through 10 goes into AKD8 switchgear. Then when you get to AKD 10, that's the Wave Pro setups along with the Intellisys, okay? And then the next generation after that is actually the IntelliGuard G, which is the AKD 20 switchgear. So now for this, we're going to have 3 buttons we're going to use. We're going to use charge close. And the reason we have the system here labeled charge close, just to discuss this for a second. When we came up with this, we had a whole different types of breakers to work with. You have some of the first generation of GE breakers, like the GE AK1, where I move the handle up, I bring the handle down, and the breaker closes at the bottom of the stroke. ITE K-lines do this, where you take a manually operated K-line, you pull that black handle down, and boom, it closes at the bottom of the stroke. So you were both charging and closing the breaker in a single action. And then you have other breakers like this one, where we're going to charge the spring with 1 to 3 to 5 different strokes. And then we have to push on a button to close it and push on another button to trip it. So if you wonder why it says charge close, we had to figure out what to name this about 12 years ago, and this is what we came up with for a naming system, a nomenclature for this. So at this point, we would hit our charge close button once. Now we've got our spring charged, and if we were actually able to look inside here, we would see that it has a yellow label here that does say charged way down deep inside of this, okay? At this point, we simply need to hit our close button once, and we can tell the breaker is closed and the spring is discharged. And if we want to hit our trip button now, we hit that, and we can see that the breaker is now back to open with a green flag on it. So that's how this is set up to operate with the RSA 45A on GE AKD8 3050 frames with this size face manually operated breakers. Okay?
Let's go ahead and rack this one and kind of get into the CCM and the torque limits per RRS3 and how and why they're set to the specific ratings.
The specific ratings, if you look at it, are, if we had one here and we had it turned around, you'd actually look at the size of the finger clusters on the back. So the reason that you have the various ratings, so this one takes, if we were looking at the motor and everything, we would use 6.6 and 3.8. This one would be 4.5 and 3.8. This one would be 5.0 and 4.0. And that's based upon the size of this breaker physically, the mass of it. And if we were able to turn it around, we'd look at the amp frame size to see how many fingers are back there on the finger clusters. So the way that this works, we'll go ahead and put this on here. Okay. After we take off the RSA, let me get that done first. My mistake. All right. I'm going to set this off on the side now. Now, the GE breakers, this one, just to describe, this has 2 screws on the side. The GAKD8s use a cam lobe system. So on the side of this, you've got a cam lobe, so it's not a screw moving straight in and straight out. but we're going to press our trip button to open the racking screw and expose it. Once you've pressed it, it's going to stay open like this, so I don't have to try and have all my fingers in there at the same time. These two Delrin inserts are going to go into the side of the face. And then I can twist this, the racking mechanism, to help line it up and get it in there. Let's see. Am I going on this thing? Come on, get it. Let me just check where my index was. There we go. That's it. That's fully seated. And now I'm going to take and I'm going to get the clamp in the trip button properly. There we go. Now, this breaker's not in a cubicle right now, but this is just how it's made to be set up. Okay, and we'll take and we'll adjust again the numbers. The cam lobe will actually move on the side of the system.
Can you explain, so whenever the input settings are hit or met, what exactly happens within the current control module?
Okay, so just to explain what's going to happen here, and I'm going to take this other RS3 off the AKD6 breaker and explain it. It'll be easier to understand. Let me move this here for just a second. Okay, so we use two protection mechanisms for the circuit breakers. Whether we use a torque clutch with a slip disc in it, whether we use a perfotorque here. This is a mechanical device which is set up with a limited amount of force we're going to let it generate before it clicks and makes any noise to let you know, hey, you're trying to use more force than what you should be using to try and rack this circuit breaker. And then we have the additional protection that we use on the RS1 and on the RS3s. Which is our CCM, or current control module. The current control module is set at a value lower than the value of the clutch. The clutch is usually set around 5 foot-pounds higher in terms of maximum allowable force than what we let the CCM try and generate. So if I'm using, say, if I was, as an example, let's say I'm doing something with a Magnum DS breaker. I know that every Magnum DS breaker that's out there that's 3,200 amps and below should take under 10 foot-pounds to rack on and off the bus if everything's in good condition. So I could set a clutch on my RS1 or on an RS3 to around 15 foot-pounds, and I should be able to rack all of those without any problems. And then the force that we're going to set in here is going to, with the appropriate RS3, is going to be under that value. Okay? We don't want to let you try and hurt anything, so we're going to talk with you about the amount of force it should take. And just one thing to note, up until about 2012, no manufacturer ever put the force required to rack their circuit breakers in any manual. ABB was the first one I saw with their VD4 switchgear, and then Schneider with their MC set, and following that shortly after the Master Packs in about 2012, 2013, were the first switchgear manufacturers that actually put that in there. If you looked at anything 2010 earlier, they just looked at it as an additional warranty item that they didn't want to have to worry about until you, the customer, said, how much force does it take to rack my breaker? And you demanded that information, and then finally the switchgear manufacturers started giving it to you. But prior to 2012, that information was in no switchgear manual that you go look at for any manufacturer. So let's just check this real quick. This would be at 4.5. And again, you're going to watch me change this. So install, we want to put this at 4.5. Now this breaker is not going to move when we do this. And for install, and 3.8 for remove.
And then we have the clutch set at 18 foot-pounds.
And we've got our clutch set at 18 foot-pounds. So even though the breaker is not going to move, we're going to pretend like it is. And with the AKD8 switchgear, one of the nice things is on the side, there's actually an indicator for this size and for the other sizes that'll say it's connected, it's in test, or it's in disconnect. So at this point, we're simply going to hit our remove. And because we don't have it in a cubicle, it's not going to let us rack. And so when you hear something like the clutch go off right there, that's actually what we would tell you is if you have that happen, check the circuit breaker and turn the system off so that you're not imparting force into the racking system when you shouldn't be. So
this could have been, maybe it was racked in manually too.
It could be racked in manually too hard. One of the things to know is sometimes when you first start getting involved in remote racking, you may have somebody like, and I couldn't make these names up if I tried to. I went to a facility, and I won't say which one it was, but there were two guys. One was named Jughead, the other Neanderthal. All of you both guys, you had that on your hard hats. And they said, if it took 10 foot-pounds to get it in, Neanderthal could use 80. And a lot of things got broke until they started using remote racking and remote switching because things were being put in a little bit harder than they needed to be. Okay, so it's not a contest of manhood to see how hard you can rack something onto the bus or take something off of the bus. Don't let that ever get in your brain. It's got a fixed distance to travel. It should take a certain amount of force, and you want to be outside the arc flash hazard boundary while all of that happens. So that's one of the things to just understand is, it's not about how much force it takes or you being able to stand in front of this. You want to be able to go home at the end of the day. And that's the reason we say distance is safety. So now the last breaker that we've got down here is a GE AK2 breaker. It's in AKD switchgear. AKD simply means it was AK series and it's withdrawable. Okay, that's what AKD actually stands for. The difference with this one, I'm just going to open the door and show you real quick, is this is what we affectionately call a one-arm bandit because it's got an arm that moves over here up and down. We have an RS2 system. If you go on our webpage to go look at the standard RS2 video, it will show you the AK switchgear tooling for this type of breaker. We have stuff for the AK1 types of breakers and also for the mains, which have an arm that's got to go up and down like 5 times to go in and go out. So, but that's an RS2 application, not an RS3 typically, or anything like that. So we're going to say that this breaker is in the installed position, which it is. We'd have to remove our handle here and take it off. And you're going to see that this one's got 2 little pins on here. And you're going to see that this has got a collar that's going to restrict it for traveling the distance of those 2 pins so we don't over travel anything. And in terms of, this is what I was referring to earlier. I'm going to do this once manually just to let everybody watch. But when you move this handle up one time, you can watch as this happens. You're going to pull it up. And then when you come down, it's going to close at the bottom of the stroke. Boom, just like that. So there was no escaping from the front of this until you had an RSA. So I'll go ahead and trip it. We're going to take our handle off now. And now we're going to put our RSA on it. Now, this one tells us it's 1 stroke, 2.8, 2.8 on the setup. I think Ben got it set up for me already.
Right, so like you were mentioning earlier, so once you press the charge close operation, this one will actually close upon being charged. So once it returns from that first stroke.
Okay, so we've got this connected and we've got it ready. So we've got one, there we go, 2.8, so it is set up. And so now we're just going to touch our charge close button. Boom, it's closed at the bottom.
And we can remove it so we can see the indicator that we're closed.
Yep.
And then if we needed to take this gear offline and trip it.
Then what we would do is put the ArcSafe back on. And now we take our handheld remote, step outside the arc flash hazard boundary, and depress the trip button. Then you would work to rack the breaker out and then put your lockout tag out tags on it.
So,
have we got any questions? Let's ask that right now. Because again, if you were dropping in or dropping out, you know, we're going to have this reposted on our YouTube page. If you've got other questions that you think of afterwards, email them to info@cbsarcsafe.com, or you can give us a call at 877-472-3389.
so any more questions from YouTube? I think we've touched on almost all of them. Give it a little bit here. So the question is this product just for opening and closing, or can it rack in and out as well?
Okay, one of the things to just understand is this. There is not enough space on a lot of the faces of the breakers, or based upon the way a system is built, that you can just put one thing on there to do everything, okay? So with an AKD8, I don't have space available, nor can I leave the racking mechanism door open and be able to charge, close, and trip the breaker. So it's broken down to task specific, a remote racking device and a remote switching device. So you don't want to let somebody be able to try and rack a breaker without making sure that it's open first. You don't want to let somebody be able to charge, close, and trip the breaker without making sure it's in the proper position. So you're not out to try and speed up operations necessarily. You're out to keep your people safe. And sometimes people go, well, it's going to take me a little bit longer to do something. Well, it takes you longer to put the PPE on and take it off, to be truthful about this. And your view is not obstructed necessarily because you don't have the big hood on when you're doing it this way. So you can take your time, and what's 5 minutes of your life, in all honesty?
So Clyde asked, you have these same tools for other breaker manufacturers, correct?
Yes, we do. We actually make over 700 products, and that's because people like you ask the question, hey, I've got a GE safety switch. I've got a Eaton knife blade switch. I've got molded case circuit breakers. I've got panel boards. I've got motor control centers. I got this handle that nobody else has seen before. Can you tell me where I get replacement parts and things for this? So we'll work to help you identify what you have, and if you need help with parts, we'll try and point you to our right sister company who can assist you in that matter and get you back online and keep your systems up and running. I've actually been in Saudi Arabia working with refineries, and they showed me a picture of a Westinghouse circuit breaker. They said, we can't find this thing. They say it's obsolete. And I say, contact our sister company, Advanced Electric Motor Controls in Irving, Texas. They've got that circuit breaker in stock. And they're like, really? I said, let me get you the email address and I'll get you to the right people. So.
Okay. Let's sit here for just a little bit more. If anyone has any further questions, I have 70 people still in the room. I went ahead and asked Clyde if you had any specific breakers in mind.
Yep.
anything for K-line or K-Don. So
Yes, K-line and K-Don, the RSA 30 family, and the RS3 K-line series. So you've got K-lines were made by ITE Gould, then by BBC. You'll actually see a square D one once in a while, and then ABB. And then if you look at the ABB MB series, that was there using a similar mechanism, but then putting a big blue face on it, changes your cubicle so it could be ABB. So we have things for those also. You can look it up on our online catalog or our product finder, RSA 30, RSA 30A.
right. Also, they have the electronically.
There's also the electrical ones, which usually have like 2 or 3 push buttons depending upon the version. And we've got the RSA 30B, I think, for this, and the 30C.
Okay. We'll sit here for a second more. Touch back on that last.
Again, look us up at info@cbsarcsafe.com if you've got other questions, or 877-472-3389. Thank you, and if we don't have anything else, you guys go out there and have a safe day.